Mail-order bride arrived to find 4 children and a fire that wouldn't stay lit, but she became the warmth they longed for. The train's whistle pierced the crisp October air as it pulled into Willow Creek Station, belching steam and soot into the pale morning sky. Eleanor Whitman pressed her gloved hand against the cool window, watching the small frontier town materialize through the haze. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not from the journey's end, but from the beginning of something entirely unknown. She smoothed her navy traveling dress and checked her reflection in the window's glass. At 26, she was considered past her prime for marriage in Boston's society circles, but here in this remote corner of Montana territory, she hoped to find purpose beyond the suffocating expectations of her former life. The letter from Thomas Brennan had been formal, practical, a widower with 4 children seeking a wife to help manage his household and provide maternal care. No mention of love or romance, which suited Eleanor fine. She'd learned that love was often a luxury women like her couldn't afford. As the train lurched to a stop, Eleanor gathered her carpet bag and small trunk, her possessions modest but carefully chosen. She'd spent her savings on the journey west, leaving behind her position as a governess to a wealthy family who'd grown tired of her quiet efficiency. The platform was nearly empty save for a tall, broad-shouldered man in work clothes and a worn hat. His dark hair showed threads of premature gray, and lines etched deep around his eyes spoke of worry and sleepless night. 4 children stood beside him like stair-steps. The oldest, a girl of perhaps 12, held the hand of a boy who couldn't be more than 4. Miss Whitman, Thomas Brennan's voice was deeper than she'd expected, rough with uncertainty. Mr. Brennan. Eleanor stepped forward, noting how the children pressed closer to their father, their eyes wide with curiosity and weariness. "These must be your children?" "Yes, ma'am." His hands twisted the brim of his hat. "This here's Mary, my eldest. She's been trying to keep house since." He cleared his throat. "This is Samuel. He's 10. Little Emma there is 7, and that's Benjamin, our baby." Eleanor knelt to the children's level, her skirts spreading around her like petals. "I'm very pleased to meet you all. I've brought something for each of you from Boston." She reached into her bag and produced 4 small packages wrapped in brown paper. Mary stepped forward first, her chin raised in a gesture that reminded Eleanor of herself at that age, determined to be strong even when the world felt too big and frightening. The girl unwrapped a small leather-bound journal with her initials in Boston gold. "For your thoughts and dreams," Eleanor said gently. "Every young woman needs a place to keep her secrets safe." Samuel received a set of wood-carving tools, Emma a small doll with a painted porcelain face, and little Benjamin a wooden horse that fit perfectly in his small hand. Their faces lit up with wonder, and Eleanor felt the first crack in the armor she'd built around her heart. The wagon ride to the Brennan homestead passed in relative silence, the children stealing glances at their new stepmother-to-be, while Thomas focused on the muddy road ahead. Eleanor observed the landscape, rolling hills dotted with cattle, stands of aspen and pine, and the vast sky that seemed to stretch forever in all directions. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way that made her chest tight with possibility. The house came into view as they crested a hill, and Eleanor's heart sank. It was a modest 2-story structure, but even from a distance she could see missing shingles, a sagging porch, and windows that needed repair. Smoke should have been rising from the chimney in the cool afternoon air, but the sky above the house remained clear. "I know it's not much," Thomas said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Martha, my wife, she kept everything running smooth. Since she passed last spring, I'm afraid things have gotten away from me." Eleanor heard the pain in his voice and saw how his shoulders curved inward, as if carrying an invisible weight. "A house is just wood and nails, Mr. Brennan. It's the people inside who make it a home." Inside, the truth of the situation became even clearer. The main room served as kitchen, dining area, and parlor, but it was clear that survival, not comfort, had been the priority. Dishes sat unwashed in a basin, clothes were piled in corners, and a thin layer of dust covered most surfaces. The large stone fireplace dominated one wall, but it was cold and dark, filled with ash that looked days old. "The fire won't stay lit." Mary said, her voice barely above a whisper. Papa tries every morning, but the smoke comes back down and fills the house. We've been cold for weeks. Eleanor set down her bag and rolled up her sleeves. Well then, that's the first thing we'll fix. Samuel, will you help me gather some kindling? Mary, perhaps you could show me where your mother kept her household supplies. Emma and Benjamin, you can be my special helper. For the next several hours, Eleanor threw herself into the work with a determination that surprised even her. She'd always been practical, but something about this place, these children, awakened a fierce protectiveness she hadn't known she possessed. The chimney problem became clear after some investigation. Birds had built a nest that was blocking the flue, and years of neglect had allowed debris to accumulate. With Samuel's help, she climbed onto the roof, much to Thomas's alarm, and cleared the obstruction. When she climbed back down, soot-covered but triumphant, she found all 4 children watching her with something approaching awe. Now, she said, wiping her hands on an old rag, let's build a proper fire. As the flames caught and held, filling the room with warmth and dancing light, Eleanor felt something shift inside the house. The children moved closer to the fireplace, their faces relaxing for the first time since her arrival. Even Thomas seemed to stand a little straighter. How did you know what to do? Emma asked, settling beside Eleanor on the hearth. My father was a minister in a small town, Eleanor explained, brushing a strand of hair from the little girl's face. Our church was old, and the chimney was always giving us trouble. I learned that sometimes the most important things are the ones we can't see, like what's blocking the way for warmth to flow. That evening, Eleanor prepared their first meal together, a simple stew made from what she could find in the pantry, but seasoned with herbs she'd brought from her own small garden back east. The children ate hungrily, and she noticed Thomas watching her with a mixture of gratitude and something she couldn't quite identify. After the dishes were cleared, Eleanor gathered the children around the fire. Back home, we always ended our days with a story. Would you like to hear one? Benjamin climbed into her lap without hesitation, his small body warm and trusting against hers. Emma curled up beside her, while Samuel and Mary sat on the floor, pretending to be too old for such things but listening intently nonetheless. Eleanor told them about a brave princess who didn't need rescuing because she was too busy rescuing others, slaying dragons with kindness, healing wounded creatures with her touch, and building bridges where others saw only impossible chasms. As her voice rose and fell with the story's rhythm, she watched the tension leave the children's faces. Will you tell us another tomorrow? Benjamin asked sleepily. Every night, if you'd like. When the children were finally tucked into their beds upstairs, Eleanor found herself alone with Thomas for the first time. They sat in companionable silence by the fire, the crackling flames the only sound between them. I need to be honest with you, Thomas said finally. I don't have much to offer. The ranch is struggling, money's tight, and I'm not good at the things Martha was good at, keeping house, knowing what the children need, making this place feel like a home instead of just a place where we sleep. Eleanor studied his profile in the firelight. What made you write to me, Mr. Brennan? He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Mary found me crying one night, he said finally. About a month ago, she was trying to mend Samuel's shirt, but she'd never learned proper needlework, and the tears just got bigger. When I saw her frustration, saw how hard she was trying to fill her mother's shoes, he shook his head. A 12-year-old girl shouldn't have to worry about keeping her family fed and clothed. None of them should have to live in a cold house because their father can't figure out how to keep a fire burning. You were grieving, Eleanor said gently. There's no shame in that. Maybe, but my children needed me to be strong, and I wasn't. I'm still not sure I am. Eleanor turned to face him fully. Mr. Brennan, Thomas' strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up again and again, even when it seems impossible. You wrote that letter because you knew your children needed more than you could give them alone. That took tremendous courage. He looked at her, then really looked, and she saw something spark in his eyes, hope perhaps, or the beginning of trust. The next morning brought new challenges. Samuel had developed a cough during the night, and Eleanor could hear the wheeze in his chest that spoke of something more serious than a simple cold. She spent the morning caring for him, preparing steam tents and herbal remedies, while Mary helped with breakfast and kept the younger children occupied. "Mama used to make tea from pine needles when we were sick," Mary said quietly, as Eleanor tucked Samuel back into bed. "That's wonderful knowledge to have," Eleanor replied. "Would you like to help me gather some? We can make it together." As they walked through the woods behind the house, Eleanor learned more about the family's struggle. Martha had been the backbone of their household, managing everything from the kitchen garden to the children's education. Her death from pneumonia had left them all adrift, struggling to maintain the rhythms of daily life. "Papa tries," Mary said, her voice thick with the weight of premature adulthood. "But he doesn't know how to braid hair or mend clothes or help Emma with her reading. And Samuel won't listen to anyone about his chores. He thinks he's grown up now that Mama's gone." Eleanor stopped walking and turned to face the girl. "Mary, you've been trying to take care of everyone, haven't you?" Tears spilled over despite Mary's obvious efforts to hold them back. "Someone had to. Benjamin still cries for Mama at night, and Emma's been having nightmares, and Samuel acts tough, but I know he's scared. Papa's sad all the time, and I don't know how to make any of it better." Eleanor pulled the girl into her arms, feeling how thin she'd grown, how her shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. "Oh, sweetheart, you're 12 years old. It's not your job to fix everything." "Then whose job is it?" Mary asked through her tears. "It's all of ours," Eleanor said firmly. "A family works best when everyone contributes what they can, but no one person should have to carry all the weight. That's why I'm here, not to replace your mother, because no one could do that, but to help shoulder the load." That afternoon, Eleanor instituted what she called family meeting time. They gathered around the kitchen table after lunch, and she listened as each child shared their concerns and needs. Samuel wanted to help with the cattle but felt like he was too small. Emma missed having someone read to her at bedtime. Benjamin just wanted his stomach to stop hurting, a problem Eleanor suspected was related to anxiety rather than illness. "Here's what I propose," Eleanor said when everyone had spoken. "We're going to create new routines, new traditions that belong to all of us. Samuel, you're going to work with your father in the mornings, learning the ranch work, but in the afternoons, you'll help me with household tasks, so you can learn those skills too. Mary, you're going to teach me everything your mother taught you about managing this house, and in return I'm going to teach you some things I learned back east. Emma, we're going to start a reading hour every evening after dinner. And Benjamin, you and I are going to work in the kitchen together every morning, making breakfast for the family." Over the following weeks, Eleanor threw herself into the work of rebuilding their life together. She rose before dawn to start the fire and prepare breakfast, then spent her days tackling the accumulated neglect of months. But more than cleaning and organizing, she focused on bringing warmth back to the house. Not just the physical warmth of a properly functioning fireplace, but the emotional warmth of a family learning to live together again. She taught Mary to make bread, their hands working side by side as they kneaded the dough and talked about everything from books to boys to dreams for the future. She helped Samuel with his reading, discovering that he learned best when the words related to things he cared about: horses, cattle, and the wide-open spaces of the ranch. Emma blossomed under Eleanor's patient attention, her confidence growing as she mastered new words and began reading simple stories aloud to Benjamin. And Benjamin, who had been quiet and withdrawn when Eleanor first arrived, gradually emerged from his shell, chattering constantly as he helped her with cooking and cleaning. The real test came in November, when the first heavy snow of the season trapped them inside for 3 days. In the past, such confinement had led to arguments, restlessness, and general misery, but Eleanor had prepared for this. She organized indoor activities, taught the children card games and riddles, and even convinced Thomas to share stories of his own childhood. They played charades, held spelling contests, and worked on a large puzzle Eleanor had ordered from the catalog. When Samuel's cough returned, made worse by the cold, Eleanor didn't panic but calmly prepared remedies and created a cozy recovery space by the fire. "You're different from what I expected," Thomas said one evening, as they sat by the fire after the children had gone to bed. "Oh, what did you expect?" He was quiet for a moment, considering someone more stern. "I guess, more like a governess or a schoolmarm, someone who would come in and take charge without caring much about what we needed or wanted." Eleanor smiled, watching the flames dance in the grate. "I was a governess, actually, for 3 years to a wealthy family in Boston. I loved the children, but their parents saw them as accessories, pretty, well-behaved additions to their social status. I wanted to be part of a real family, where people cared about each other not because they had to, but because they chose to." "And do you feel like part of this family?" The question caught her off guard with its directness. She thought about Benjamin's arms around her neck during their bedtime story the night before, about Mary seeking her advice about a book she was reading, about Samuel proudly showing her a carving he'd made with his new tools, about Emma's delighted laughter during their reading lesson. "Yes," she said softly, "I do." Thomas reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. "I'm glad," he said simply. "We all are." December brought new challenges and new joy. Eleanor organized the children to help prepare for Christmas, a holiday that had been subdued the year before due to their grief. Together they made decorations from pine cones and ribbons, baked cookies using recipes Eleanor's mother had taught her, and carefully crafted small gifts for each family member. The night before Christmas, as snow fell softly outside and the fire crackled warmly in the hearth, Eleanor looked around at her new family. Mary was reading to Emma and Benjamin, her voice confident and clear. Samuel was showing Thomas a wooden whistle he'd carved, pride evident in every gesture. The house glowed with lamplight and contentment, filled with the sounds of quiet conversation and gentle laughter. "Mama used to say that Christmas wasn't about the presents or the feast," Mary said suddenly, looking up from her book. "She said it was about being grateful for the people who make your life brighter." "Your mother was a wise woman," Eleanor replied. "You make our life brighter too," Emma said, crawling into Eleanor's lap. "Will you stay forever and ever?" Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes as she looked around at the faces turned toward her. Thomas's gentle smile, Mary's hopeful expression, Samuel's shy nod of agreement, Benjamin's sleepy contentment in her arms. "Forever and ever," she promised. Later, after the children were asleep and she and Thomas sat alone by the dying fire, he turned to her with a serious expression. "Eleanor, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly." She felt a flutter of nervousness. "Of course. Are you happy?" "Really happy. Not just making the best of things." She considered the question carefully. 6 months ago she'd been a lonely governess in a grand house, invisible to everyone except the children in her care. She'd had security but no real purpose, comfort but no warmth. Here in this modest house on the Montana frontier, she woke each morning with anticipation instead of dread. She had work that mattered, children who needed her, and a man who valued her for who she was rather than what she could provide. "I've never been happier," she said truthfully. "This place, these children, you've given me something I didn't even know I was missing." "What's that?" "A home where I belong." Thomas leaned closer, his hand cupping her cheek. "I love you, Eleanor. I didn't think I could love anyone again after Martha, but you've brought so much light into our lives, into my life. I love you too," she whispered, the words feeling both new and inevitable. "All of you, this whole beautiful, chaotic, wonderful family." When they kissed, it was soft and sweet, full of promise and hope. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white, but inside the fire burned bright and warm, a beacon against the winter cold. As spring arrived and the ranch began to bloom with new life, Eleanor reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She'd answered an advertisement for a practical arrangement, expecting to trade her skills for security and perhaps companionship. Instead, she'd found a love deeper and more fulfilling than anything she'd ever imagined. The fire that had refused to stay lit when she arrived now burned steadily, filling the house with warmth and comfort. But more than that, Eleanor had become the warmth this family had longed for. Not just the heat of flames and hearth, but the warmth of understanding, patience and unconditional love. On a warm day in May, as she worked in the garden with all 4 children chattering around her, Eleanor smiled to herself. She'd come west as Eleanor Whitman,
a spinster governess with few prospects and fewer choice. Now she was Eleanor Brennan, mother, wife, and the heart of a family that had learned to love again. The fire would never go out again. Eleanor would make sure of that.